diaspora. We are the diaspora. We are the diaspora. We are the diaspora. We are the diaspora. My name is Megan Curie, and I am the creator of DiasPOR US podcast. All right. Hello. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, depending on what coast you are on. But today we are so lucky to be sharing this West Coast, East Coast energy with the fabulous musician, writer, advocate, artist extraordinaire, Michael Love Michael, for those who don't know. And for those who do know, her, Michelle, this fantastic artist from New York City who brings what it means to be queer and expansive and in the moment to music. And I'm just really excited to talk a little bit about your album today that's dropping this Friday and all of the damn things you do. So without further ado, welcome to the space, Michael Love Michael.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Megan Curie. You're amazing. I feel like when I first heard about your podcast and first saw you promoting it, I was always kind of secretly hoping that maybe one day we'd get to talk on it. I've loved all of your guests and just how expansive your conversations are. So I feel very honored to be included in this.
I'm really excited to have you, especially because I think you are one of the most socially outspoken artists right now, and especially because you really are so experimental and you're really pushing boundaries, and you're doing so in this space as a Black trans woman, and I really think there are not enough artists on the scene right now doing what you're doing. I mean, sure, right? We all love our perfume genius. You and I share a lot of similar fabulous, taste in music. But to know you personally and to know someone who's in that world doing it as well and shaking things up, I think warranted a space for some conversation. Because I know you know how to kiki, and that we're gonna get into a few things here. So
Yes, absolutely.
so can you please talk a little bit about what inspires then your work and practice as a writer and musical artist and how that overlaps?
Hmm. Right. Okay. So my practice as a writer and artist, and the overlap. Um, that's a good question. So to me, they are hand in glove. They really inform each other. Writing was my very, very first love, from the tender age of 3 years old. I remember writing in my grandmother's, stenographer, legal pads, those big yellow pads of paper, lined paper. I would just be practicing, I'd try to mimic her cursive handwriting. She had perfect cursive. And I used to be give me knee pads, whenever I wanted to write. So there was something instinctual about me seeing words on a page and me being I want to do that by 3. Then obviously that was nurtured more through, school. And then once I actually started reading for real,
Not for real, for
then,
real.
for real, and then music just kind of I feel like it always spoke to me as a way of telling stories in the same way that writing did. Not in exactly the same way, it reaches different senses, but they both function in terms of reaching people across diaspora, across the world, with new ideas, with ideas of revolution or change or simply just reporting on life as it is, helping us figure out our human experience. So to me, the two are they're the same for me. Music is just another way of writing.
Amazing. And, you know, I would love to talk a little bit about the album that's coming out this Friday, because I thought, what better way to have this conversation and shed light on this amazing new project for new listeners? Um, yeah, let's get into it. please tell us about your upcoming album release and kind of because, as I mentioned already, you're so experimental. I personally have listened to your music and I'm transported to a different place each time something comes out. So, what separates this body of work from previous?
Um, Thank you for that question. This is my third album. It's called Bruiser. And It's my third album since 2020. I got really serious about finally releasing music in 2020. I feel like it had always been something I'd like flirted with and um but was too afraid. I felt like maybe I didn't have enough to say. And then I think 2020, like it did for a lot of people, like it really galvanized me and it radicalized me in these ways that I'm still experiencing the effects of. And then it said, bitch, it's now or never. Oh, am I allowed to cuss? I was like,
Are
okay, it's like, can I cuss?
the kids in my world know what these words mean. So
Okay,
is
okay,
family
okay.
friendly, and in
I know
my
you,
family, we swear. That's why we're so intelligent.
okay.
Yes,
I was like, I know you teach youngins and they might be listening, but
of course. And my
okay.
youngins would be like, Miss Curie.
They'd be like, Miss Crib, what was Miss Michael Love Michael doing?
Yeah, and we don't use that language in my class. Should not get back to work. Thank you. Happy Monday.
That's not the choreo I taught you. Do it again. No,
Read.
I'm
Not
kidding.
read. Yes.
I love you.
Ah.
Oh my God. Okay.
So, bitch, it's now or never.
Yeah. So I was like, bitch, it's now or never, basically. And the music coming out of me was so like dark and kind of stormy and like full of this like sort of like almost operatic
Mm-hmm.
rock, crunchy, industrial kind of drama, you know? Then the second album was a bit more like, I was exploring more stories about like family of origin and this concept of home and coming home to oneself. So that lended itself to a more like organic, kind of rootsy, sound like R&B and B and soul are like heavily textured throughout that project. This album to me feels like I've been describing it as like the scrappy little engine that could. It was one of those things that I didn't know it was coming into any kind of form until like almost like the end of the process. I'd made like over 100 demos for this. Yeah.
Good.
I just,
Beyonce.
yeah, I think over
Beyonce
100.
with the foreplay.
We all have the same 24 hours as Beyonce, as the adage goes. And
We sure do. We sure
in
do.
mine, I was writing nonstop. And it charts really the journey I've had over the last couple years, contending with parts of myself that are actually quite thorny. Um, like, what does it mean to be a person? A theme that kept coming up in my songwriting and in my studio sessions was, what does it mean to be a person that is harmed? And then what does it mean to be a person that causes harm?
Mm,
Right? Because I think for as much as there's harm and all kinds of oppression and violence done upon me, sometimes it's like they say, hurt people hurt people. I'm
mm,
not a saint, like I've definitely been harmful to others, and it's like really diving into that, I think, and sort of like in a way holding myself accountable
mm.
has been an important part of my healing.
Yeah,
And it's also informed the ways in which I like, speak out or advocate for other causes, because I'm like less afraid to fail or to fuck up or to, do you know what I mean? Like I'm not interested in being perfect,
yeah.
you know? And so the title of this album, Bruiser, really came about because I'd taken up boxing as a way to kind of like work through some really serious trauma that kind of like sprung up over the last couple years, and to kind of like, put the focus back on like strength in my own person and strength in my own body. How can I nurture that? And boxing is such a great way of accessing that. And I was walking around with gloves one day, and a friend of mine was like, he was like, ooh, he was like, my little bruisette. Like, you know, he was just like, you know, joking. And then I was like, oh my God, you just gave me a gift. Like, you
My
just,
God, I know that he did.
yeah,
I can
bruisette.
imagine you in that moment, like,
I was like, wait,
child,
it
sounds like,
was really true light bulb moment. Yes. Yeah. And then I was like, what's the like sort of gender all
yeah,
encompassing neutral version of that bruiser? And then a bruiser to me is someone who can hurt, um, can hurt and feel things very deeply because they've either experienced harm or pain. They're also someone who can love very
yeah,
deeply, you know,
can
to
come
the
back
point
from under that very
and
deeply.
can come back from under that
Yes,
and fight way through it. So
yeah.
this album encompasses both sides. So it's like it has this dark, intense, like beat driven energy, and then it has this beautiful, soulful, organic energy. And I'm like singing about love for the first time in a meaningful way. And so there's just a lot of new stuff, and I can't wait for people to hear it.
I cannot wait for people to hear it because, as we know, I've had the privilege and pleasure of working with you since the start of this. I think I was one of the people who was like, I'm waiting for some music. Just
Yeah.
do it. And, to this day, Jaguar still sends me. And so I know what power beholds with your music when it comes to your audience. And so why I think this is so critical is because we are in a shape-shifting moment collectively, right? The POC community, the queer community. I think people are contending with what their role is going to be. And sometimes we cannot contend with that role until we move inward.
Yes.
And so I love that this is kind of a love letter to the generation of healers that are being born. And
Absolutely.
just listening to you takes me to the next area that I kind of want to get into, which is, you know, what challenges have you faced as being an outspoken artist? Because you are very outspoken. You're both a vocal advocate for social justice, but you stand on your queer family business, and you be taking names. So, what inspires you to keep continuing this work, um, especially in this moment of doxing and blacklisting? And it's something that I continue to revisit on these episodes, especially when I do have Black women on, because we already know who enjoys the brunt of most of that burden at the top first. And so I think it's important to hold the space to talk about that a little, because what I do want some listeners to take away from these episodes is that no fear business, that what we all need to roll up the sleeves and get a little more dirty and a little more uncomfortable. And so I know that you've been doing that, so I would love to talk a little bit about what that's looked like for you.
Thank you. Oh, I love that. Oh, I quickly just wanted to say one more thing about the album, and then I can segue. But
Go for it. We're not done with the album though, but yes, get into it.
okay, I just want to shout out that I executive produced this album top to bottom with like Ruben Bouchard, who I also worked on the last album with, and like it was this crazy process of like we made so many sounds from scratch. So I just think like this album is like a collage of things that people have not heard, and you know, if they have heard it or it is familiar, they haven't heard it in this way before. So like I'm just really excited to, you know, like I really feel like I've like leveled up as like a producer, which means that I've like also been able to like articulate my point of view more clearly. So to me this album feels like the most like cohesive project I have so far, you know, in that sense.
And I think it's important for people to remember producing is also being in control of your work, of your
Right.
art, and the future and the projection of what that is. And I think it's another result of this moment, this historical musical moment that you're in, where you are nurturing the tools that you will need to gather your people through your music. And you cannot do that unless you are calling the shots, and you are, madam, calling the shots. So I appreciate it's all very interlinked. So I'm really glad you pointed that out for us, because it makes sense that you in this moment are demanding
Mhm.
that your work be heard the way you need it to be heard, and you're finding producers who can do that with you. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
yes.
You. Oh my, oh, this is so affirming. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Especially as women, especially as femmes, especially as a Black trans woman, it's epically important that I be in charge of my narrative. You know what I mean? And
Yes, we do.
say what I need to say.
Not the thank you. I don't have to go
Say what
back
the I need to say.
to beat that out. It's the editing on the spot for me.
It's the editing on the spot because I'm an editor, also a former editor, which brings me to your question about.
Yes, let's get into it. I know where this is going.
Mhm. So what I want to say about this is it's gonna maybe take on a few different prongs, but the first thing I kind of want to talk about is like what what it had been like as like a person who was sort of like full-time active in media during the time of like Black Lives Matter,
Mhm.
um, and all the protests that emerged from that time in 2020, and everything that was going on with the coronavirus pandemic that we are still facing, by the way. You know, I know people can't wait to be back to normal, but there is no such thing as a back to normal, in my opinion. Um, there's just the new normal that we establish as a collective,
Yeah,
right? And how are we on time? Are we good?
we're great.
Good. Okay. 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 And you know, I was an editor at a place, and I was trying to push for more coverage of stories about Black Lives Matter, and specifically stories about anti-Black police brutality. And one story in particular, the case of Ahmaud Arbery, obviously struck me as something that was really important that we needed to cover. I faced a lot of resistance at first when I was trying to push to advocate for that story to be covered. Nobody thought, apparently, that it would get a certain kind of traffic, which to me is a very cynical way of viewing this. But alas, like, I'm not the only Black media creator that finds this kind of thing in predominantly white, spaces
Mhm.
where
Yep.
there's just a complete lack of awareness about the world outside of like one's immediate sort of like bandwidth of coverage, you know? And I was like, we need to be telling stories like this because this is part of what's going to shape our world. And sure enough, that case and many others, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, et cetera, like really, pushed, really, really like, uh, catapulted I guess this moment where people were just like fed up and had had enough, you know what I mean? And I just remember feeling really frustrated, um, at work, and also just feeling like I wasn't. Um, I remember like when there was like a traffic report that was sent out in the morning, and the person sort of in charge was like, "These are the kinds of stories we need to be covering," like as if it was his own idea, and I was so furious about that. I just was like, "Wow!" Like I just remember all that resistance. But I think like, when you start speaking out in that way, you kind of have to like build the momentum of it, right? Or you
Yes.
get more momentum. I
Yeah.
think I was also angry enough that I wanted to really do something about how I was feeling. You know what I mean? And I don't think people should necessarily have to wait until like they're fed up to do something. They can start from where they are right now, even if they feel like they don't understand the full scope of an issue. It's always a great, Google is free. There's so many
It's always a
resources
good moment to
available.
get started. I
Exactly. Like even just talking about how you feel or the confusion that you feel inside, it's moving through it. You know what I mean? And I feel like when you start for me, when I started that process, I had to keep moving. So
Mm.
uh, things kind of escalated. I ended up leaving that job, and there was also kind of like a media reckoning kind of around the same time. Like there were a lot of like Black writers and editors at predominantly white publications who were also speaking out about some of their experiences working in these like establishments, you know, that didn't respect or value their opinions or voices at this time when, you know, like pro-Black solidarity was supposed to be this like cause that we all took on, but not everybody was taking it on, you know. All these diversity and inclusion and equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion committees sprung up out of nowhere. And who was tasked with leading them but Black people in this country, Black and brown people, right? Not which takes the onus off of
Yes.
people perpetuating any kind of racial or racist violence from actually learning anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right, because it's like, but y'all are teaching us. Y'all are supposed to teach us. It's your job now to teach us. You know what I mean?
Again. Mm-hmm.
Again, you know what I mean? Despite your pain, I get that you're in pain. I get that, you know, your brothers and sisters are being shot indiscriminately in the streets. However,
However,
now
me and my white friends are uncomfortable all the time, so I need you to teach us
teach
so
us
that.
about racism. I don't want to be a racist.
Yeah.
I read one books book, you know?
Oh, I remember.
I
I
put up a black square.
I remember leading those circles, those virtual
Yes.
circles for teachers. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and people crying and you
Yeah.
know all of that, you
I
know.
remember my favorite was like, teach me like that. I
Love
know.
that,
Teach
please.
me. And I was like,
Please.
luckily for me, from day one, I didn't have the goddamn nerve to be dealing with anybody. So it was
Hmm.
teach yourself, here you go. And looking
Yeah,
back, it's like, I wasn't as violent as I could have been. And people are really lucky for that. None of us,
absolutely.
I don't think we knew what was coming,
No,
really, and
no.
polite.
I also think, you know, like people I've heard this said before. I forget who. I feel like someone really iconic said this, and I'm sad that I can't remember who, but I feel like I've heard this quote floating around of like, "You're lucky that what we want is equal rights or equality and not
Yes.
change."
Yes. Someone,
So,
yes. Who was it?
so I forget. I want to say it's not like a
One
Toni
of the
Morrison,
iconic mothers.
James Baldwin. I don't know. Someone really important said it, but
It's true.
we'll have to circle back. But this is true, right?
Folks are
Like
lucky we're really wired differently, considering
exact,
all things, and that we were
exact,
sent here to heal
ex-
because,
exactly,
as honey,
exact, exactly, exactly. So that idea of like healing kind of just brings me forward. Like I feel like first of all, everyone should listen to Black women.
hello,
Everyone should listen to what Black women have to say about liberation and oppression. Everyone should listen to what Black women have to say about leadership, about decentering oneself, about decolonial thought processes. I mean, there have been so many incredible texts written, you know, by everyone from like Bell Hooks and Nikki Giovanni down to like trans scholars like Janet Mock, Laverne, you know, like people are doing this work.
and they've
And
been
there's
doing the work.
and have been doing the work, you know what I mean? And so I feel like, you know, I just feel very like I'm not special, you know, in this way. Like I think I'm part of a very powerful lineage of Black women and femmes who show me how to be in these moments.
Couldn't agree more.
And
I feel the
I,
same way.
yeah, you know, and I'm pretty sure it was Toni Morrison who said or it was either Toni or Alice Walker who said now's not the time for despair.
Yeah.
You know, like we face like a critical moment like the one we're in now with uh, the genocide of Palestinians or in the Sudan or in Haiti or in Tigray or, you know, like all of these like genocides happening around the world that America in some way, shape, or form has its hand in, you know, whether it's our tax dollars or you know, we're just being implicated because of capitalism and, you know, some
Yeah.
white person's desire to stay in power or stay rich, you know, um, or steal resources. Like, you know, it's easy to like fall into this place of grief and despair that is like so insurmountable that like you just can't even think of like what to do next. And I like the way I like to live my life is by this idea of taking the next right action, right?
Mhm.
Like, I've heard so many ideas about how, there can't be revolution without beauty, which to me means you can't sort of be beautiful for revolution or for the change that needs to happen without taking care of yourself first. So like self-care is not it's not the same as like isolating and not being accountable. Self-care is like you care for the self so that you can show up for the collective.
I think that's
It's
important because capitalism has taken self-care like it does with everything else and has somehow figured out a way to monetize it. And self-care
hmm
is finding even the most holiest of ways to bear witness. Self-care is moving internally. It is
yeah.
prayer, it is meditation, it is stillness, it is silence. It is you. It is centering the self to prepare for the battlefield, whatever that
Absolutely.
looks like. And I think that that's really important because people will hear self care and they're like, you see, like, I just need to tap out because it's too much. And how can I be for the work if I'm breaking down? It's like, no, the self care is finding the tool so that you can stop breaking down so easily at the hands of capitalism. And
hmm
that's going to look different for each of us. You know,
hmm
some of us got to
hmm
do that work a little differently because we're so entrenched in capitalism. We're so
Yeah.
entrenched in the taking and in the excess. For some of us,
Yes.
the purging is not, you know, going and getting a facial. The purging is, how can I find self care without spending a single dime on it? Let's start
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. There's so much to like unlearn. I think for some people there's so much to unlearn. For me even, there's so much to unlearn that like I I it's almost like you don't even know how to take care of yourself is what
Yes.
you realize is what
Yep.
I realize at times. So I think to kind of circle back around to like the point of your question, I think um, all of this really, I think I also really take on the role of what it means to be an artist. To me, it's like James Baldwin says the role of an artist is to make you conscious of the things you can't see or you don't see. Um, And he also says to be black in America is to live in a constant state of rage.
Yep.
T on both parts. But like I really take that role, that mantle, like very seriously. I think that because I've been given a really specific kind of gift from like the divine that I'm still figuring out how to access and how to tap into, um, how these stories can like flow out of me and into the world. Like I have to I must I think it's just important that I always make sure that I'm doing something that speaks to whatever moment we find ourselves inside of. I mean, I even think about like things like, I make what I would call experimental pop music, and we all know that pop is short for popular, right? So anything can be pop music, really. Anything that's sort of a part of a zeitgeist or captures a moment in time can be pop music. Um, and so if I'm making pop music, then I want to be a part of whatever the moment is. You know what I
You are the
mean?
moment, if we're being quite frank.
I mean,
You are the moment. Like, so let's remind folks of that.
yeah.
Not to interrupt that thought.
Period. Cleared.
Can you tell I've been watching Atlanta all weekend with my
Yeah.
bestie in New York?
And you are the moment.
Kendra would remind you of that.
And you were the moment too, Megan Carey. Okay, listen. You know, um, yeah, and we can hold it's just beautiful that we have spaces like this where we can like hold each other, affirm each other, and like go out into the world and do it with everyone else. You know what I mean? So that was a very roundabout long answer, but I think I'm still learning and I'm still figuring it out. And like I said, I think because of the work I've been doing on myself in in therapy, through my spiritual practices, through my artistic practices, like I definitely have a lot less fear of failure or of like not doing it right, you know.
Yes,
Um,
not doing it quote unquote right. Which
mhm.
brings me to our wrap up question. We all love this one because it's so different for everyone that's in space with us. But what are there any inspiring notes or advice for POC artists who wish to live in their truth as both artists and advocates?
Hmm. Hmm. This is such a good question. I think I think there's something really powerful about learning who you are
Mm.
and learning to know who you are and learning to love who you are. Because if you have that, you become, it's like people can't really fuck with you. You know what I mean? Like it becomes really hard for people or systems of oppression that are designed to destroy you to fully impact you in the way that they're meant to, you know? So I would always say I feel like what I feel compelled to say is that people should definitely start their their sort of journey toward like liberation here in the heart and soul, you know. Figure out who they are, what they know, what they're about, and then sort of like see what naturally unfolds from there. Begin expressing that, telling people about who you are and what you know.
Mhm.
Letting people become malleable, become like the water, you know. Um, Listen to Black women.
When in doubt.
You know, when in doubt, listen to Black women. No, but you know, I would also say that like if a person can cultivate some sort of spirituality for themselves, I think that that's also important.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be, you know, a god of your understanding. It can literally be the ocean. It could, as long as it's something that's greater than you,
Yes.
because I think we live in a great big world, and I think you know the human ego wants to sort of make everything really sort of small in a way and say you are the only thing that matters. And in
Mhm.
a way, that can be true. You do matter, right? Your life, your everything, your wholeness, your expression
Yes.
is all very sacred. But you're also a part of a great big world that needs you. And I think in order to really have access to that largeness, um, that sense of expansion, like I think it's, for me, it's been very crucial to try to expand my spiritual life. And there are a million ways to access that. I'm not here advocating for one way, you know. Um, I don't know. I think the sort of the self knowledge piece and the seeking of something spiritual or something divine, a connection to nature, you know, whatever, a connection to humankind that's rooted in acts of kindness and love and community building or service. Like those two things together, I think can make a really empowered artist, a really empowered advocate, and a willing and able learner. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. Oh, darling, thank you. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you. And yes, I just want to remind people that your album is dropping on Friday. And what better way to support artists who are the moment doing the work than to support the art, right? So, with those closing words, can you please one more time let folks know where to find you, where to find your
you.
work, and how to support you?
Thank you. So yes, my name is Michael Love Michael, as mentioned. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Michael MICHEL AELXO Michael, MICHAEL. I think I'm also on TikTok under that handle, LOL. I don't really use it, but you can find me there. But my music can be, it can be downloaded or purchased. You can stream it, wherever you get music, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, etc. But I think definitely the thing that helps me most is if people actually like buy the music, if they're into it. You can go to my Bandcamp. You could just type in Michael Love Michael in a Bandcamp search bar or on Google, and the link will come right up. Please pre-order. Well, by the time this comes out, the album will be out. So buy the album. It's out on CD. And I think I'm gonna make a vinyl later on. So this is my first CD with like a lyric booklet and all that. I worked with a designer to do it. It's
That's
gorgeous. Yes, I
it's the
know. Like
90s.
old
It's the
school
bring back
90s.
for me.
Yes, exactly. And also the music has kind of a 90s flavor too. So
Of
it's like
course
a
it
great,
does. Of course
you
it
know.
does.
I mean, come on
But
now.
here you go, Gen Z. Let me show you how to really bring it back.
Come on. Yeah. Come on now. Yeah. So that's what it's giving. But yeah, people buying the music means a whole lot. If you see a post of mine where I'm promoting something, please share it. I'm like heavily shadow banned all the time because if I say anything about Palestine or anything about anything that is criticizing America, I get
Mhm.
whatever. So yeah, and tell your friends if I'm promoting a show, come to the show. Those are the easiest ways to support and amplify my work.
Well, Michelle, thank you for the work that you do. And I know I speak for so many when I say I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, and I love you. I adore you. Thank you for your work and your advocacy and your standing on business. Because you do it, I can do it.
Yes, together.
Listen,
Hmm.
yes, together, together.
And there's your note. The rest is on the album. Please and thank you.
Together. No, it's on the album. Okay.
Bye, Michelle. Thank you.
Bye. Au revoir.
We are the diaspora.